It is Coast Copper's very first metal investor forum presentation. Coast Copper was recently rebranded last fall from a company previously known as Rough Rider Exploration. This was a company run by Coast Copper, by Scott Gibson. Also like to thank the previous presenters. I like the analogy there with Andrew at BlackRock, noting that he was around a 10 to 15 cent stock price until he presented with yourself there, Brian. So hopefully the same is the case for us here. And although it is a copper story and we had silver stories earlier on, I noticed yesterday there was quite a few copper stories, and you're right, they went quite extensively into the need for copper in the future. I'll start the presentation off here with my first slide showing a picture of our premier project. This is on northern Vancouver Island. And the reason why I chose this photo is this is an old iron ore open pit mine that was mined in the 1960s and 1970s. And around the edges of this photo, you can see some rusty rocks. Those rusty rocks were later found to contain significant copper and gold values in them. And keep in mind, they were mining magnetite or iron ore in the 1970s, and they actually avoided and stayed away from these rusty rocks because it was contaminating their magnetite concentrate. That's why we've entitled this Rediscovering the Historic Empire and Benson Lake Mines. Well, let's continue here. The traditional forward-looking statements. I'll ask you all to read those as part of the handouts or on our website. Well, as all companies, the sort of four main pillars here: your team, your strategy, the capital structure, and your projects. The team, I won't go into it very much here other than to say it's in the appendix of our presentation, other than the fact that myself and our team have all been in the business 30, 40 years. We comprise geologists, people with financing backgrounds, and people with marketing backgrounds. And I'd be happy to talk about that later or in our presentation. Strategy. One thing, you know, that really everybody really should be when they're investing is backing people that have particular expertise. We've seen with our previous speakers here, they fill a niche, and that's the same with us. I've been exploring in British Columbia and throughout the world, but primarily in British Columbia, for copper and gold deposits with both juniors and majors for all of my career, in excess of 35 years. And so that's why we've chosen to focus in British Columbia on copper. Keep in mind, most people might not know this, but British Columbia is Canada's top one copper producer. So, you know, you want to look for copper in Canada, you should be in British Columbia, for example. The other strategy that we've chosen is because we are a relatively small company, there is a lot of copper porphyries in British Columbia, but those take a lot of funds. And I found a few myself and been part of companies that done that. So we've chose to find a project, for instance, that is a copper skarn deposit, which has higher grades, which take less money to fund to explore. And we'll talk a little bit more about capital structure and try and go through this quickly and talk about our project mostly here. As Brian mentioned, Coast Copper really is a rebrand from last fall. It was previously called Rough Rider Exploration. We have about 55 million shares outstanding. Share price around 12 cents, gives us a relatively modest $6 million market cap. We've really had a very faithful shareholder base, like Brian, and every time that we've gone to need a little bit more money, we've gone to our existing shareholder base, and they have ponied up every single time. We've kept our costs really low. In these days of COVID here, we don't even have an office, for example. And really, I'm a geologist by background and also the CEO. And so I kind of do double duty at times, depending on where the requirements are. So we keep the G&A quite modest. We raised $1 million of flow through last fall and promptly went and started drilling within basically days of closing that financing. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on here. So where are we? Well, this is northern Vancouver Island on the west coast of British Columbia. I think, many people think of Vancouver Island perhaps as Victoria or the Southern Gulf Islands. I want to assure you, with growing up on Vancouver Island, living on Vancouver Island, my father worked here in the 1950s. One of the first homes I lived in was in Coal Harbor near the Island Copper Mine. This is a resource area. I think this was quite exemplified to me the other day with one of the other large players in the belt, North Isle Copper, who had a recent investment by Michael Gentile, who also extolled the virtues of being in this particular part of the world. For those of you that don't remember, the Island Copper Mine, situated near the center part of this image here, this was Canada's third largest copper mine, but mined between 1970 and 1995. I think in excess of 400 million tons. We have extensive logging road networks, paved highways. We have a small hydroelectric power plant on the northern part of our claims, which was a legacy of the old mines in the area. We have a wind farm, 100 megawatt wind farm at the northern end of the belt. So you can't ask for a better place for establishing a mine with access to ports, roads, power, and good clean power, and relatively low elevations. So we can work almost year round, as exemplified by our program we just completed before Christmas. Now the project in a little bit more detail here. It's hard to really show the scale of things, but this property, one of the first things we did was double the land package. And after picking it up from an individual, it's over 20 kilometers long and over 10 kilometers wide. There's over 22 historical mineral occurrences. There's 3 past producing small open pit mines and 2 underground mines. I don't really know of any other junior valued at a $6 million market cap that really has an entire district of past production here sitting in British Columbia like this. The Mary Widow mine at the basically 2/3 of the way up the mountain near the open pits, which is just the first picture at the intro slide. That was last worked in 2007 and 2006 to 2008. And there was a historical resource that was put out about 1 million tons of a couple grams gold, 0.3 copper, some very interesting cobalt numbers, which also plays well into the battery metals. And that outlined with some significant headline drill intercepts of 50 meters of 6.5 grams gold. Also further down the mountain on another horizon, approximately 500 meters lower in elevation and more than 1 kilometer lower in geology, the Benson Lake mine horizon was mined over 4 kilometers of strike length. This was mined intermittently from the turn of the century up until the 1970s by Cominco. When they shut the mine down in 1972, they outlined on some old plan maps and sketches over 3 million tons of 1.7% copper. They didn't assign a gold grade to that, but we know historically from the head grades, they were running about 1-to-1. So for instance, 1 gram gold would equivalent to about 1% copper. That's a deeper target, and we'll take some longer drill holes, and we've elected to sort of push that off to the side for now. But I just want to try and wrap your head around the scale of this. 4 kilometers of underground workings, 1 kilometer basically up geology, 3 open pits. And that's only a small portion of the property. So what did we do? Well, like I said, we doubled the land package. We went into the permitting process. We secured over 100 drill pads, also 65 line kilometers of IP. We got on the ground and compiled over 100 years of historical data. And I was amazed that this property didn't have a modern database. And so we started as geologists, we started looking at this and looking, well, keep in mind, at the top of the mountain that was mined for iron ore. So copper was something they actually tried to avoid in their concentrates. So we started doing the methodical, quote unquote, boring work, which was what was found here, what work did they do, and really learned that really very little exploration had occurred for copper not too far from the existing pits. So we went in and did some channel sampling, for instance, while we were waiting for our drill permits at the time. Got intercepts here like 10 meters of close to 10 grams gold, outlined significant soil anomalies. And every single time we've come to this property for exploration, we found brand new occurrences literally within a stone's throw of the pit. Some of these ones were even named after myself here with an ounce gold and 23% copper, and also new IP anomalies. So upon quickly securing the drill permits and the financing, we moved to a program of drilling here in late November and early December. We have certainly lots of targets. We elected to go to what we'd call the low-hanging fruit, or the shallow ones. This was namely around that iron ore pit down on the first slide, and that's the where most of the drill holes are in green to the left-hand portion of the picture, and that was drilling around the margins of that old pit. Really shallow drill holes, and also very cost-effective in this area. No helicopters, road access, can live in town, just as some of the previous speakers alluded to. Go stay in the motel. I've spent a lot of time in the Golden Triangle in my previous years, but those costs are expensive with helicopters in remote areas, and this offers year-round exploration. We focused in 4 kind of main areas. Keep in mind, we had the historical resource with those significant 50 meters of 6.5 gram drill intercepts. We put some more drill holes around to confirm and extend. And I'll draw everyone's attention. Please read our news release that came out just before Christmas, which alludes to the fact, although we don't have assays, we've mentioned in there about the fact of what we were seeing and the encouragement we were seeing in that drilling. Copper Knob to the north, that was that area where we channel sampled with 10 meters of 10 grams in a rock channel sample. A Raven pit to the north, 200 meters north of the pit, there was a historical iron ore pit that mined 22,000 tons of magnetite, and then they gave up, complaining that there was too much pyrite and copper in their magnetite concentrate. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I kind of like too much copper. And so we poked one drill hole under that, and we've seen some encouraging results on that. On our way out of the mountain, and just before the Christmas break, as we brought the drill down the mountain, about 500 meters lower in elevation, we put 2 quick drill holes, one into the Benson Lake, up dip of the old historical Benson Lake mine, and you can see the underground workings there. Quite extensive, but there is still over 1 kilometer down the dip plane from the end of those workings to the intrusion that occurs underneath the Mary Widow pit. And keep in mind, there was over 3 million tons left in many of these, as we've titled here in this sort of orange color, Cominco unmined resource blocks. So lots more work to do there, and we're eagerly awaiting results. Thankfully, we won't have to wait as long as most people, because we put the samples into the laboratory into December. That's another great benefit, as opposed to sending samples to the laboratory in the summer like everybody else. So our plans here really is to get these results back, move to a drill program that's probably double in size this summer, continue sampling and exploring, because every time we go there, we find something new. And of course, continue our discussions with the local communities and the Coatsino First Nations. We also never had time to talk about our other projects, but we're the only landholder that holds ground adjacent to the Red Chris mine. We're the only junior with land adjacent to Gold Mountains property. And I see that I'm running out of time here, so I'll just wrap up with, we have quite an experienced board between the 3 ex-CEO, Scott Gibson, the chairman, and myself. We have over 11 million of the 50 million shares, so fairly tight company. We quickly move to the drill program. We're drilling in an area that is historically been mined. We're not having to go out and do grassroots exploration, and we've got a pretty low burn rate.